declining powers who are incapable of reaching what they need with military means tend to just die. So the Soviet collapse is probably the best example of the peaceful approach. And I broadly think that some version of that is going to happen to China. I mean, you never know. China's history is replete with how it can all go to hell in a short period of time. Not all of it's pretty. None of it's pretty. But there's nowhere for them to go. There's no place that they can go and invade that solves their problem. Even if they captured Taiwan, it's not like they would be part of the global trading system anymore because they couldn't operate the semiconductor fabs themselves. If they could, they'd already have them. In the United States and Japan does the designs for them. So Taiwan is a good nationalist chest-beating topic, but it actually doesn't achieve anything strategically anymore. They could go into Vietnam again, and when they went in 79, they got treated to the same gentle welcome that Americans did, but that doesn't solve any problems either. They can't get to India because of the Himalaya. They can't go to Russia because the Russians will nuke them. That just leaves Kazakhstan, which leaves me wondering what the winner gets. There's no war scenario here that helps China from a trade and energy, a food, or a manufacturing point of view.
And a quick follow-up, because I'm really curious about this. We keep using the term China, which brings to mind the nation state. But as you know, and I think listeners know, there's China, the nation state, and then there's the Chinese Communist Party. So when you say specifically that this could mark the end of China, do you mean that it marks the end of China, this like 5,000-year-old like civilizational nation state? Or do you mean that it's the end of the Chinese Communist Party?
This is the end of China. This is the end of the Han ethnicity. Now, that's not going to disintegrate completely in 10 years, but definitely this century. The population bust is so extreme and so far advanced, there is no way that the Han survive as an entity, much less remotely in their current borders by the end of the century.
What the Han project is, and like, Uyghurs in Western China, they're trying to make them more Han. So can you like talk about like what is a Han? Well, that's the if I'm going to be a
that's
CCP
what they say.
The CCP is now stationing agents in homes of Uyghurs so that the wife and the husband don't have intercourse. It is a flat out genocide. There is no issue of re-education here.
No, I think that's important. I think, actually following up on this, then if we return to Chinese history, what do we think it's most akin like? The warlord period of the 1910s, the post-Mongol period of the Song Dynasty king?
We've never seen this kind of population collapse. The Black Death, when it hit Europe, wiped out a third of the population. It took everybody 150 years to recover. Now, that set the stage for some positive things like the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. But in the meantime, it kind of sucked. What we're seeing here is a population decline, not as quick as what happened with the Black Death, but far more holistic and without an obvious recovery. One of the things that we're dealing with in China and a lot of countries around the world is you can only have a large population structure with industrialized inputs, whether it's food or medicine or infrastructure. You take that away, and that is what is going away, and you have to revert to pre-industrial population pattern. Now, in any country, this is going to be a horrific challenge, but in China specific, they industrialized so fast within 45, 50 years. So we have seen a complete scrubbing of the skill sets that are necessary to engage in large-scale pre-industrial agriculture. It's just not part of the skill set anymore. So if you then remove the industrial inputs, you're talking about population crashes from famine and decivilization at the same time. What emerges on the backside of that is an open question. Now, historically speaking, I think the most likely outcome here a decade from now is that the North will descend into kind of a neo-Maoist tyranny that makes the Cultural Revolution look like a picnic, where the population collapses are by far the most extreme, and the return from the emptying of the cities to the countrysides as people return to subsistence agriculture is the norm. So a completely pre-industrialized tyrannic society. And then separately, you will have the city-states from Shanghai down to Guangzhou. Historically, these cities have gotten the majority of their food from abroad. They partner with foreign companies and countries to get food and to get capital and to get technology, and then they process that with local labor and infrastructure to make products to participate in someone else's supply chain. And that has been the norm for those city-states for most of recorded history.
I want to bring up one last thing on China before we move on. What I wonder about, though, is the role of technology, automation, like those very obvious cliches, but also like the very just true dynamics. I follow a couple like CCP show accounts, and something they've like pointed out in past weeks, like responding to this demographic question is, So a world where they continue to grow, growth is down, but growth continues. You have increased automation, therefore requiring fewer workers in more concentrated spaces.
The productivity stats that we're able to get out of China, and yes, I know Chinese statistics don't support that argument. They suggest that while total labor productivity has increased by a factor of 2 or 3 since 2000, total labor cost has increased by a factor of 22. So it's just not happening. Now the automation is required. The automation that is required to make this, to really move the needle, is expensive, and it doesn't come from very many places. The machinery that the Chinese make is very low end. So if you want to do textiles, it's probably okay for that, but you're not going to use it for automotive. For that, they have to import it either from the United States or from the Europeans, with the Germans generally being kind of the go-to country for everyone. They do the best machinery in the world. And then there's the problem that you still have to train the folk. And if they haven't moved up the value added scale fast enough, then you have another problem. So I can see the Chinese being squeezed from both sides. There's also a third issue that is more relevant for most of the rest of the world as opposed to the Chinese. Machinery is expensive. Installing it is expensive. Building it is expensive. Retooling it constantly as the product evolves is expensive. And since we have this baby boomer cadre globally that is in the process of retiring right now, they're taking their investment capital with them. So anything you want to do that's new, especially installing new industrial plant, now has to be done in an environment of tighter capital markets than we have seen since at least the 70s, probably longer.
Peter, I want to talk about America. I realize we're talking about Russia, we're talking about China. Turn some of your analysis inward. What's going to happen to our population?
Well, let's start with the good news. The United States is the world's largest energy and agricultural producer and the world's largest energy and agricultural exporter. That's a good start. Also, our baby boomers did something that no one else did, and they had kids. So say what you will about the millennials, they're here. And that provides the United States with ballast in its consumption and its production now, and will provide ballast with its advanced production, its tech system, and its capital generation in 10 years. That's great. I mean, you can't screw that up. We'll try, but I don't think we're going to make it. The biggest challenge the United States is going to have for the next 5 years is rebuilding that industrial plant, hopefully before the Chinese system completely implodes. I doubt we're going to make it. So we're going to have a simultaneous shock from product shortages. At the same time, we're trying to build that dirty word, inventory, to insulate us. At the same time, we're trying to build out everything about our manufacturing system. This is going to generate what will probably be the most inflationary period, at least since World War II. And it will last for at least 5 years. Now, while we could theoretically screw this up, this is probably also going to be the fastest growth that America has experienced since before the Civil War, because we're looking at just a massive expenditure to build out that asset class that's necessary for us to have the things that we want and need.